Hi everyone. I have a question for you. Do you feel like some friends and family drain your energy and in negative ways impact your emotional and mental health? Or do you feel flustered with shame that your professional and personal life is not up to par with your culture, society, family, and sometimes even yourself? If so, I'm so glad you're here with me, listening to my second episode of Fearless Chapter 2 Healing. We all need to heal from the pressure of our lives and truly find our true selves and our purpose. And it's all part of the process that is our journey. In today's episode, I have a conversation with my cousin Laura, who has just begun her journey toward healing not only her own being, but helping others heal theirs through her work as a somatics entrepreneur. We talk about her story and healing journey through somatics and writing, and we both share secrets of intimacy and boundaries and what it means to have them when you truly love someone. Shame, guilt, blame, and having no boundaries is normal when it's normalized. We ought to learn ourselves better to understand our own boundaries and triggers, and when we need to just let things go, to nurture and care for our own relationships, friendships, and most importantly, ourselves. I hope this conversation helps nurture you a bit. Thanks for listening. Before we go ahead and get started, I do want Laura to introduce herself to the entire world and about who she is and what her passions are.
I want to start with, who and where I come from. I am the daughter of Teresita Ubalde Coelho, the daughter of Antonio Diogo Coelho, the granddaughter of Jose Coelho and Isabel Coelho, you too, the granddaughter of Benjamin Ubalde and Dolores Torres Ubalde. I'm a daughter of immigrants who traveled from Goa, India, and Verac Catanduanes in the Philippines. I come from farmers and teachers and healers and caregivers and entrepreneurs and survivors. Just taking some breaths. I'm a settler here on Ohlone land. I was born here in what we call the Bay Area. I was born in Fremont, California, and then was raised most of my life in Castro Valley, California. I was educated in Berkeley, California. In my adult years, been learning a lot more about the indigenous history of this land, and really grateful to the stewards, to the Ohlone peoples of this land. I am a healing arts learning practitioner. So that means that I am very interested and curious about healing arts. Mainly, I've been studying somatics and expressive arts, mindfulness, and I have been kind of stepping out as a practitioner. But I'm a beginner and I'm learning, and that feels really exciting. And I've been working in community wellness as well at different nonprofits here in Oakland, California. And I'm an auntie. I have two wonderful nephews, Ethan and Ben, who who are so just wonderful and life-giving. And I'm queer. I identify as queer, or I feel queer, and that is definitely an identity that I'm just kind of coming into more and more. I think that covers it. Does that cover it? And I'm your cousin. I'm like arriving.
I think that covers it. I mean, that's who you are, unless you have anything else that you'd like to share about who you are before we go ahead and get started with the deep stuff.
Ooh, thanks for having me, Kay. I also just want to say, I'm really proud of you, and this is really, I feel really honored to be coming on to your podcast, and just in awe of you putting your voice out there and doing your work, doing the healing work, and inviting others to do their healing work. And I think that's really huge. I got here. I honestly feel like in the past while, I don't know exactly when, maybe it's the past 5 years, I've been waking up. I feel like for a lot of my life, I was kind of asleep, or I was doing what I needed to do. As a kid of immigrants, my job was to do well in school. So that's what I did. I studied and I did well in school. And it was okay, study, do well in school, and then get a job and be financially stable. And hopefully you find a husband and you have kids and you have a house, you know? So this was the track. This was the track I was on for a long time. And so I did all things. I graduated from UC Berkeley undergrad with a public health degree. I started working first in a for-profit space, and then I did a fellowship with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And then I went back to grad school after that for public health. And it was really in grad school. I got very sick. I want to say first that I had health issues throughout my life. I have scoliosis. I had to have a major surgery when I was young. You remember that. I was so devastated after that. So I had like different health issues growing up. I mean, I had an underbite and had to have braces. You know, I got glasses. My sister doesn't have to have glasses. My sister didn't even have to have braces. I'm like, Annabelle, you got all that. Anyway, love my Libra sister. So, anyway, so I had health issues, but it was really in grad school. Like, I had a major health issue in grad school. We honestly don't know exactly what happened. What me and my sister have kind of pieced together is that it was probably an appendicitis that got misdiagnosed. So then my appendix burst. But essentially what happened was that I went to the doctor. I was trying to get help. Eventually I had to go to the emergency room, and I ended up staying in the hospital for 21 days, and 13 days I didn't eat. And during that time, we think that my appendix burst. And yeah, just like all of the medical stuff, like they were doing scans and pumping me with different antibiotics. I had to be transferred from a community hospital to UCSF. Like, it was very intense. And after that, that just changed everything for me. No longer be on this. I started waking up because I could no longer just like be on this path and be on this like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be successful in the United States. You know, it's like, so that from there I started like looking at different ways of healing. Like I tried acupuncture for the first time, and then I got connected to this community-based organization that does community wellness work. And then they do like so much stuff. Like, it was like expressive arts, and then there was a psychic healer, and then there was like energy workers, and just like doing really engaging. That's how I found generative somatics. So it's just like really engaging our wholeness. And that's how I really entered into community wellness. And I think it makes sense. My mom's a nurse. My sister's in the health field. My dad was a guidance counselor. So it's like, I do think like it made sense. But it happened through like a really intense medical situation that I entered. But it's one of those things where I'm like, wow, my life, I'm so grateful. I'm not grateful, but I'm grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was sad when you were going through all these medical issues, and it's interesting that you say that, because I think we come from a family of healthcare workers, but also a family who's also had medical issues. And, you know, I had epilepsy when I was growing up. I have a lot of teeth problems. And so yeah, it's interesting that your journey has gotten you here into healing work, because I think you were trying to understand how to heal yourself, right? And so when you try to understand how to heal yourself, you find yourself in these communities where they heal others and not only themselves, right? And so you want to help others. In our previous conversations, we always talk about poetry and writing. And I know that you also write like me. A lot of my close circles know that I like to write poetry and short stories. And I've always had that passion for it. And that's how I shared my repressed emotions. And when I put it down on paper, it wasn't repressed anymore. And that's how I started to heal at the age of 8. So that was my form of healing, just writing in general. And I know that we've talked about this, and I've read some of your poems as well. So why don't you just share a little bit about your poetry and when you started writing and how it's really helped you?
Thanks for that. And it just happens. Like, sometimes, you know, we had a recent conversation where I was like, can I call my poetry? Because it's like, I didn't learn formally poetry. And so I honestly feel like it's just these like short little journal entries or love notes to myself or things I want to remember. Just like I have tons and tons of notebooks and I just have written things down. And sometimes I just go through them and I'm like, oh, that seems like a poem. And then I'll save it, you know? So yeah, that's a little bit about my process. I think it's just happening, and I want to create more structure around it and encourage myself to write and share more, but that's actually, I'm just beginning that. Yeah.
I've loved writing in general, like whether it's letters to somebody. Remember when I first moved here from India, and I stayed with you in your house, and I used to write letters to my friends back home, and they used to write back. And I've always liked that type of intimacy, where somebody's writing you a letter, and it's just for you and it's for nobody else. And so there are these like little things that you share with somebody through writing, and that's how I feel about writing in general. Like even when it's poetry, if I'm putting it down on paper, sure, at the time it's based on my feelings and based on how I'm feeling, and it's a way of processing those feelings. But I also want somebody to read it, and I want the world to know how I feel, because chances are somebody else is feeling the exact same way, and I want people to know that they're not alone, right? And so for me, I started writing because of that, because of processing my feelings. And also, it was a cry for help, really. When I was 8, I wanted my parents to find it and ask me questions about it. I wanted my siblings to read it and ask me, like, what is this about? And really probe. So it was I was seeking someone's attention. But as I've grown, I've always seen writing as very intimate, as something that, if somebody gets to read my writing, they get to see into me, right? Like see completely into my soul. And we've talked about this too. And I remember when we talked about intimacy, it came straight to my writing, because I think every poem for me is a piece into my experiences and how it's really impacted me and how I feel about it.
Yeah. Intimacy. I mean, it's just such a juicy, yes. I'm curious about intimacy. I want to talk about it. I want to hear what people think about it, and I want to hear your poem. Is now a good time to listen to your poem?
Yes, it's a great time to listen to my poem. And it's the perfect topic too, because it's all about intimacy. Okay, the poem is called Into Me You See. If I walked away and never looked back, would you try to walk in front of me, try to face me, try to see into me? If I was successful in your eyes, would you still compare me? Tell me about their kids, their cars, their homes, their monies. Would you remind me of their successes if you were happy with yours? If you were happy with yours, would I have daydreamed about clouds, clouds with a sky so bright, birds chirping while the sun shines so bright that I did not see the blade. I just felt it sweetly brushing against my wrist. I just felt myself push into it in my skin. How good it felt when I felt the gush of crimson red, saintly liquid flow out of my porcelain 16-year-old skin. This feeling has never left me, the feeling of never being good enough, always being a part of me, right beside me, like a toxic partner, whispering falsified words in my ear, my brain, magnifying those words into a poisonous spiral of inconspicuous thoughts not good for me. Thoughts penetrating through my body, constantly reminding me of love and how unworthy I am of happiness and love, unworthy of intimacy.
I love that poem. Thank you. With intimacy, it's like with this person who you were with, like the kind of intimacy inside of that like brought up so much stuff, and like about intimacy from your childhood and things that happened inside of those relationships or in your home or whatnot, and like just the connection there. and like the healing thread there. And then also when you're saying like what changed for you spending time alone, it's like that intimacy with self, of like how so important it is to have that time with yourself in order to build perhaps healthy intimacy with other people. And that's like something I've been super inspired by you in terms of how at ease you are with solitude. And that's like a practice that I'm just starting to develop and come into in the last couple of months, where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm enjoying spending time alone. And that sort of that intimacy with self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important. And I think a lot of people probably grappled with it this past year because we're as a community and as a society, we're not used to spending so much time in a space, in the same space for long periods of time. And I'm sure a lot of people grappled with it being in solitude, right? Grappled with it living with a partner, maybe wanting solitude. So I think a lot of people can talk about being in solitude and intimacy in many ways, really, with yourself and partner and all of this stuff. Tell me, Laura, I'm talking all about intimacy. What is your definition of intimacy? And how have you experienced it over the years? Has it changed over time? And let's start with what your definition of intimacy is today, right now, in the present.
IntoMeYouSee. I really like that title, because I really feel like that basically hits directly in what intimacy is, or what intimacy means to me. I think you recently had looked up and shared with me like the literal definition of intimacy.
Yeah, intimacy is closeness between people in personal relationships. It's what builds over time as you connect with someone, grow to care about each other, and feel more and more comfortable during your time together. It's physical or emotional closeness, or a mix of the two. The state of being intimate.
Yeah, that felt really spot on to me. I mean, I think we can, of course, I think everyone has unique definitions, and I'm curious about those, but that really spoke to me when you shared that. And yeah, there's something about closeness. There's something about knowing each other. It's like, it could be just physical intimacy, I guess. You could just have sex and that's it. It could be emotional intimacy, like what was named in the definition. There's so many different ways to be intimate. Like even the intimacy I'm thinking between like healers or practitioners and the people they're working with, or like the intimacy of the medicine that gets made between people, like intimacy with land. It's about relationship and knowing. For me, I feel like comfort, vulnerability, those are all things that come up for me. And honestly, when I consider intimacy, I also think about the struggles and the hard parts, and like really just like the stuff we often are told to shy away from, and that we do shy away from, or the difficult conversations, sometimes the nasty, ugly fights. Like this all feels a part of intimacy. Like when I care, I get triggered. I'm just like, I can get triggered.
And why do you think that is?
I can get triggered when I care. Because I think it's because I have expectations. I have embodied expectations. And even if I can tell myself all day, like, don't have expectations, but my body still has some expectations. And I'm learning how to like connect with my automatic reactions. And like I'm learning very much at the beginning, like learning how to connect with my automatic reactions, and then connecting to what I actually care about and choosing an action that's aligned with that, rather than maybe my automatic reaction.
And so for the people that are listening and don't understand when you say my body has expectations. So tell me a little bit more about that when you said, I don't have expectations, but my body has expectations.
I mean, yeah, just the split between thinking and feeling. I'm trying to think of an example that's like right size to share. Like, what's the amount that I feel comfortable? Like, what's a good example? I got into this herbal program, which I'm really excited about to study about plants.
So you applied for the program and you got in. That congrats.
I'm excited. I want to build relationships with plants and land. And I feel like I've been saying that actually for years. And I have built some. So I want to give myself credit. But also, just it's not relating to land and plants is not practice in my life in the way that I want it to be. Like it's not as big a part of my life as I know that I want it to be. And so I applied to this program because it would create the structure and sort of the learning community to help me learn about plants and connect with land. And so then I told my mom, and this program costs money. So I told my mom, and she was like, that is silly, like don't spend that money. You could just buy a book, you could study the plants. And like she has a green thumb. So she's just been learning through and doing it that way, like reading a book and doing it. And in part also because, just the way that my parents were shaped and like they didn't have much. My mom told me the other day for a while, my dad only had 5 shirts. So they just made it work. They just had to do things to make things work. So, and for me, that's like really, I'm grateful because I'm in a situation where, I'm now unstable financially trying to pursue my dreams, and I can move to my mom's house, which is like a huge privilege. That's the labor that they did and made that happen. And so, my mom just has a different shaping and a different approach and is like, no, don't do that. And don't spend that money. Like you're wasteful. And I don't disagree. But, what I want my reaction to be in that situation is I want to be curious. Like, yeah, what do you think about this? What's making you say that? What were your conditions growing up? Like, learn about her, understand her point of view, like come with curiosity. And I just moved into a fight. I was just like, well, I don't even remember all the things that I said, but I was like, defending myself and like I want this and this is the way I learn, and I think in some time I can get there, and like really and I think that's also valid and good. But what I also want to have curiosity. So I want to keep my center. I want to be honest about who I am, show up honestly, but also be curious and receive her. So I don't know if that helps in terms of like with intimacy. My automatic reaction with my mom when I get criticism is to defend. But what I want my reaction to be, it's to come in, like literally to come into a fight, right? That's my body's move. But like, I want to be here. I want to be more in my center.
So that helps with understanding. You said your body has expectations. And I think I wanted a deeper kind of an answer. Like, why does your body have these expectations? And is it because of, and like you said, your body is embodying the expectations. Sometimes you don't even know what you're embodying. And I think, it's the irony, right? Where you're like, I want to be there with my mom because that's how you'll unpack your body, right? That getting to know your mom and your ancestry, that'll unpack like why you have these expectations. But you do the complete opposite. And I think that's part of course, your ancestry, your culture, communities that we were all a part of, a lot of different things. But I think that's everybody. when you're intimate with somebody, and when somebody is that close to you, right? So they're like close to you. So the literal meaning of intimacy is being close to somebody. And so when you let somebody in, obviously you're going to have these expectations of how they show up in your life.
Yeah, it's just what you just said sparked in me. It's like when we become close to someone, we're likely going to practice the ways that we know how to be close, right? And we learned how to be close from our families. And sometimes those ways like don't work for us. That's like actually not how we want to be close, So, and then, to unpack that, to notice that, and to, with the right person or people's, like, to actually practice a different kind of intimacy. It's so hard. That's actually making me think about boundaries.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about that? Or the other thing I wanted to not forget was the kind of for me, the conflation that happens between intimacy and love. It has often been hard for me to separate those things, but actually they're different. And there was a definition of love that I wanted us to talk about or to bring in, because I feel like that's what is coming up. Like that's the thing that's coming up for me when you were sharing just now about, oh yeah, like I've done shameful things around people that I have a certain level of closeness with and a certain types of boundaries really with. It's like I understood it conceptually, but I didn't, like, I think back to like the concept versus what's embodied. Like I didn't understand it in an embodied way. Just really appreciating how you pointed to this piece around boundaries are about you. My boundaries are about me. Your boundaries are about you. It's
Mhm.
about honoring you.
Mhm.
Right. And it's amazing how when we have our boundaries, how things can shift around us and even encourage other people to have their boundaries. Can I share a couple things?
Sure.
So Instagram live. Well, one, there's a teacher, Prentice Hemphill, who has this really popular quote. This is a somatics teacher that I deeply admire and highly recommend checking out. Prentice Hemphill has this quote: boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And then there's one more quote I want to share. This is from someone on Instagram I follow. I don't actually know a whole lot about them, but they put a lot of inspirational stuff around like self and higher self. Their name is Bunny Michael, and they say this. This is me. This is like one version of yourself saying something. Okay, me. It's hard to have boundaries with people you love. Higher self. Taking care of your emotional needs makes you more present and available when you do spend time together. A boundary is an expression of love. It's so hard sometimes, though, like when I receive a boundary, like when I don't receive a response from my sweetie as quickly as I want to. It's hard to be on the other side sometimes of the boundary, when there's something I want, or but having to try to reorient towards, okay, that's an expression of love. They're showing me how to love them. They're loving themselves
Mhm.
by taking this, by having this boundary or taking this time, and plus the whole host of reasons why they may not respond quickly. That's kind of separate, but yeah, I appreciate those insights about boundaries. Okay, bell hooks, all about love. Imagine how much easier it would be for us to learn how to love if we began with a shared definition. The word love is most often defined as a noun, yet all the more astute theorists of love acknowledge that we would all love better if we used it as a verb. I spent years searching for a meaningful definition of the word love and was deeply relieved when I found one in psychiatrist M. Scott Peck's classic self-help book, The Road Less Traveled, first published. Echoing the work of Eric Fromm, he defines love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Explaining further, he continues, love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. We will also implies choice. We do not have to love, we choose to love. Since the choice must be made to nurture growth, this definition counters the more widely accepted assumption that we love instinctually.
Mm.
I think it's been helpful through, talking to you and parsing that out of like there is a difference between intimacy and it can be closeness in many forms in different ways, but it doesn't necessitate love. It doesn't necessarily mean love. Love, according to this definition, is about growth, is about your own or another person's spiritual growth. And it's a choice. And that's kind of been blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, when you're looking at love as not intimacy, not romantic, not what society has portrayed love to be, you know, or romantic love to be, what media has portrayed romantic love to be, especially Bollywood. I mean, it kind of ruins every girl's life because they think love is it's a fairy tale, you know, all lives are fairy tales. But, you know, love is really about growth and supporting it in yourself and also in others, right? I definitely do like that because I love the whole part of thinking about your spiritual growth and loving that part of yourself before loving others, right? Because that's a reflection of how you love others as well as really how you love yourself. And I think for the longest time, you know, that I don't come from a culture like that. We don't come from a culture where it's like, you know, self-love first and then love for everything else and everyone else, because it's a reflection of who you are. I think for us in childhood, we were learned that education is everything, right? That's the first thing I learned, you know, being right as a form of like my moral.
That is so real. Mm-hmm.
And so all of this stuff about healing and self-love and caring for yourself and before, you know, you show that care for others is new to me. It's a new concept. I mean, it's also this level of awareness, Laura, right? Not everybody is aware that they are being triggered.
It wasn't for a long time. Yeah.
So what made you make that switch? Like when did you like realize it was something that you need to work on?
Well, I think the initial marker was when I got sick. It was like, okay, I have to work on my healing. But when it comes to like triggers and like really working on it is probably after my dad died. Like probably after he died, just it felt like everything was a trigger and I was basically losing relationship after relationship. I was like I started cutting people out after my dad died in a really intense way. Like just yeah, just stopped. Couldn't handle was triggered all the time by so many people. And I feel like now, really only in the past year, I mean, I had been studying and doing so much work, and then maybe in the past year, it's really starting to integrate because I think I'm maybe at a place now where yeah, everything is not a trigger. And even when I get triggered, I have resources.
So we could do a sort of like breathing exercise and or short journaling exercise. I like to call it meditative journaling, although it has nothing to do with meditation at all. It's really meditative. So we can start so by just closing our eyes and taking a deep inhale, holding for 4 seconds before you exhale. And we can do about 3 more of these. And while you're doing it, I'm going to ask you a question about love and intimacy. What supports you to choose love, choose intimacy with someone?
I realized as I was writing things down that this speaks a lot to like my love languages. And also intimacy has some different qualities. But for love and also intimacy, I think that I like consistency and quality time and laughter and food and acts of kindness and support for growth through dialogue and resource sharing. It's presence. That really supports me to want to choose love and to want to choose intimacy. And then also with intimacy, I think I also choose it because of proximity or like shared goals. And yeah, I mean, overall, when I first started writing, it was like, oh, it's really about safety, security, trust. And then I was trying to break that down a little bit more.
It's interesting what I wrote. I said, what supports me to choose love is looking at my own reflection in the mirror and knowing exactly who I am through my mind, my body, what my body says to me, what it looks like, who it is, what I do with it, and who I truly am when when I'm on live. I'm in this whole phase where I need to understand myself and what I need, right? Before I choose love and intimacy with somebody.
Right. And also, just again, such an important reminder of like, we have to do that with ourselves in order to do that anywhere else. So I'm appreciating the different, the difference.
I know, right? It's different phases that we're in our lives too. So I think it's reflective of the phase that we're in.
Yeah, but then I'm just like deeply inspired because I think I'm wanting that. I'm wanting to like be in love with myself and be intimate with myself and give myself that room. So I'm feeling really inspired by it.
Oh, thank you. What do you want when it comes to love and intimacy?
I want love that feels honest and love that brings out laughter and joy. So, laughter, joy, honesty, love, intimacy. Is that an affirmation?
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
That's what I want.
What do I want from the universe? I'm just going to say that I'm very grateful for this life that I'm living. And I love myself. And I'm getting to know myself to love myself, everything about me, getting over my imposter syndrome and loving my flaws and perfections. And no one's really perfect, but my perfections are imperfect. And I love you for being here with me today and everybody who's listening. Thank you. I'm grateful for you all. And I really want to grow with my audience and with you, Laura, because today we shared each other's intimacies and definitions of love and intimacy. And so I'm grateful for that. More of that.
Yeah, I love you.
Love you too. Okay. Bye, everybody. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Fearless. In this chapter 2, Healing, I will share many bonus episodes of each guest, so make sure you hit subscribe to this podcast to be in the know of when they release. I'd also be really honored if you could share this podcast or even just this episode to people in your life that you know would benefit from listening to this episode. If you'd like to get in touch with my cousin Laura, please go to my website, www.kfrancescacoelho.com, which is also in the details of this week's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. I so appreciate each and every one of you. Ciao.